Hey, what's the matter, you?
Okay, this is Nihilism Part 2. This was actually quite serendipitous in that uh, I didn't really know about this short story at all. Um, I had, through my normal scanning of websites, one of them had mentioned this site that has free short stories. So I checked that site out. And then looking at some of the best ones that were on that site, I came across this short story, which I had not known about. And after reading the beginning of the short story, it mentioned nihilism. And I was just surprised. I was like, whoa. So then after reading it, I realized it was really good. And I actually think has some insights that are worth discussing and talking about in relation to nihilism. This is a story from Fyodor Dostoevsky or Dostoevsky. I've heard it pronounced both ways. A very famous Russian author, one of the best. Um, you see here his four top novels. I did not know he was in prison, in a Siberian prison, for having some discussions that the government didn't like. Um, and obviously, the first one after being in prison was Crime and Punishment, which is interesting. The second one is also worth noting, The Idiot. That is sort of, I have that book, I have not read it yet. Um, the Idiot, though, is about sort of trying for him to show what a moral person looks like. And it's interesting that he refers to it as the idiot. That's, of course, referring to sort of society's view of this person who attempts to lead a moral life. Um, I think that's sort of emulated here with the notion of that this person is ridiculous. The short story is, of course, called "The Dream of a Ridiculous Man." Obviously, the last one is, which is right fairly soon before his death, is his magnum opus, The Brothers Karamazov. I have read it once. It's a very dense book. Like all his stories, they're not stories that you casually read. So that's why I want to reread that one. Because if you're trying to rip through it to get the plot, you're wasting it. You gotta take your time with it and dig into it and really ponder what are the characters, what are their motivations, what is he trying to tell me here, that kind of thing. So I'm going to kind of loosely go through the plot of the story, but pause to say how does it relate to nihilism. Just down at the bottom here. So first part is obviously the story begins, and he starts right out and says that everybody thinks I'm ridiculous. Uh, Perhaps from the time, and these are quotes from the short story, perhaps from the time I was 7 years old, I knew I was ridiculous. I think it's worth considering why did he use that particular word, uh, and I would say that that sort of is an interesting phrase relating to an outsider's perspective, right? It's not really that this character is ridiculous, but this character is someone who is a deep thinker, someone who is maybe counterculture, someone who uh, tries to really ferret out, the meaning of the world, etc. Um, and of course, he said it didn't really help as he got older. The more I learned, the more thoroughly I understood that I was ridiculous. Um, and this third one I found really an interesting quote, especially when you think about today's society, where we have groups of people who think it's funny to like hit random strangers on the street or bump into random strangers on the street. He says, then I left off being angry with people and almost ceased to notice them. I used, for instance, to knock against people in the street. So I think that's an interesting corollary to some of these fools who think it's funny to punch people randomly and stuff like that. Um, I do think it says something about society. And again, I wouldn't say it's full blown nihilism, but I would call it nihilism light. But I do think this story does a great job of the core axiom of nihilism. Nothing matters. Nothing in the world matters. Nothing will ever matter. Um, it's this sort of apathy taken to the extreme that is the core of nihilism. Um, and I think we'll see that that's, besides individually being disastrous, societally, that's disastrous. Um, to think, and although in some ways you can kind of understand it. I mean, we even look at our society and you say, oh, look, the debt's at this level and nobody cares about the climate and we got these wars going on. And, you could understand how depression can, exhibit itself or represent itself in this sort of form. That doesn't really matter what I do as this small little person in the grand scheme of things. Um,
And the unpredictability of life, like people get hurt or die or slip and break their hip or
yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. In fact, if I'll think about, I mean, how many movies are based on the tragedy of if a child dies? Of course, it tears apart marriages, it tears apart families. Um, I mean, life is absolutely fragile. And some people, again, you can get into this attitude if you say, well, if it's all, like you said, random, if it's all unpredictable. Now, of course, we know that's not totally the case. There are certain things very much beyond your control, but there is certain things you are in control of. So it's a little bit of both, right? It's not totally random, but it's also not totally in your control. So somewhere the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And feel free, guys, if you want to pipe in or.
I had one book that I did read from him that I thought it's a short book called Notes from the Underground.
I think I have that one. I haven't read it yet.
And
yeah.
it was really interesting. His style of writing was like, you know how when those people can just pull you in instantaneously, like it was just entertaining. It was an entertaining. It's only a 4-hour list. I listened to the book. It was only like pretty short. But it was
I'll
great.
be honest with you. I started Crime and Punishment twice so far. I've not gotten through it. It started out. It did also start out good and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. It's a little bit depressing. I mean, maybe I just wasn't into the characters and stuff. But I will finish it. Why are you not? All right, here we go. So let's continue. So again, so you could see he's saying he's ridiculous. Like, what does that mean? Well, this is kind of what ridiculous means. He's disconnected. He's aloof. He's alone. He's separate. He sees himself, classic us versus them. I'm not part of, the people in this world. And it's also this, if you look at the value statement there, I suddenly felt that it was all the same. So when you start digging into like, what does it mean when you say nothing matters? It kind of means that your value proposition is everything is gray. Everything's at zero. All is meaningless. Because you're saying, in essence, what does it matter? If you think about it, if nothing matters, that's the ultimate statement that the value of everything is zero. No striving, no excellence, no love. You don't bother with any. Why would you bother with any of that? Because if everything's zero, if everything's meaningless, and you really live that, you're valuing everything at zero. And the natural logical consequence to that is don't be here. So, of course, he says, I resolved to kill myself that night. If nothing matters, then it makes no difference whether I exist or not.
Yeah.
This fall has a distinct pattern. And I think it's important for people to understand this pattern. You have to understand the pattern so you don't fall into this pattern or fall yourself or fall into the pit here. Starts out by the fact that we are frail, we are weak. Hell, Adler is famous in his books. He's a psychologist. Um, and he's the one who coined the term the inferiority complex. The idea being that you think about it, we all start out in an inferior position. We are children. We are babies. We are dependent. We are weak. We have to be cared for 25 years almost of our existence, at least up to 18. You're weak. You're dependent. You're inferior. And an important part of your own psychology is how do you deal with that? So inferiority is our natural state when we begin. And that's something that some people never stop, never get over, never fully deal with. Of course, part of dealing with that is coming into your own, is becoming competent, is supporting yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Take our brother Johnny. Some people never leave that state. Second point, competition, right? The world can be brutal because there are other people who do not have a magnanimous spirit. There are people who have a scarcity mentality, a zero-sum game mentality, where if you have something, that means I don't have something. And then there's only so much pie to go around. There's many, many people who believe that. I mean, the other side of the coin is the expanding pie theory, that, that there's plenty to go around, and that the more you do good, that you can create expanding things. Even again, whether it's this AI discussion or whatever, there's a pessimistic view and an optimistic view. But a lot of times in terms of competition, whether it's at school where it can be brutal, right? Grades and girls and popularity and blah, blah, blah. So us versus them is real easy. So not only you inherently have weaknesses, you're inherently imperfect, but then competition makes it where some people want to push you down to build themselves up. And how do you respond to that competition? Many people don't respond well at all. Many people just crumble. If you think that, if you believe everybody starts with a spark of life, a spark of individuality, a spark of uniqueness, and if you think about that, then what would happen for that to diminish? Could it be their upbringing from their parents where they get beaten down because of their natural inferiority? Could it be the brutality of school where competition beats them down because somebody's trying to push them down to build themselves up? Right? And that can, of course, lead to this third point. Many people just quit. They just say, it's too hard, can't do it. So they quit, or they semi-quit, or they quiet quit. Is that new thing, right? Quiet quitting, or where people are just kind of half-stepping. There's a lot of people half-stepping through life. And the worst part then is that can lead, this is not a guaranteed thing, but it can lead to, not only can I not do it, but I can never do it. There is no hope. The future is bleak. And then that's what I'm calling here the pit. So nihilism can sort of be at this last one. Nihilism light can be at any of these stages where you're starting to slip, you're starting to fall. So why did he not end it? So this is a really important part of the story. So he's thinking about ending it. He has a gun. Um, he's outside. Two things happen. One I didn't even mention here. One is he sees a little star up in the clouds. He's looking up. It's a dreary day, but he sees a star out there. That'll become important for his dream. But the second thing that happens is there's a little girl crying out. She's clearly almost in terror. She's like, "Mammy, Mammy." She's screaming about her mother. He doesn't tell you exactly, but his mother, he gets the sense that the mother is either hurt or dying. But it's important. He explicitly says, "She pulled me by the elbow. She grabbed him. She touched him. And she called out, 'Sir, sir.'" So she wanted his help. And he didn't give her help. But that evening, when he's sitting there with the gun in front of him, he felt pity. And the idea that he felt is important, because if you agree with me previously, where we were saying his value system in the ultimate nihilism, your value system is zero. Well, then why are you feeling about anything? Why do you care? Well, maybe your value system is not at zero because you felt pity that evening for the girl. And the world somehow may depend on me. So it's interesting, though. One simple connection. In this case, it caused questions in him. At least enough questions where he didn't do it. He fell asleep. But I do think, and I think this is evidenced in a lot of other evidence, that one simple human connection sometimes can be the difference at any of those stages of the fall, to stop you, to help you, to lift you a little bit, to show you that you can, it's an imperfect world, absolutely, but you can still try to make it better. And it's worth trying. One simple connection.
Yeah.
So then he dreams, and in this dream, you'll see the first thing he does is he says he dies. But the key is the general part about the dream. I'm breaking the dream into two parts. There's the dream part one and the dream part two. The first part of the dream is about traveling with a guide to a different planet, and it's just like ours. And he sees humanity in its pure, sinless form. So this is sort of like what the world could be if without sin, without being tainted by sin. And you see some of the parts of the plot where there's other people there, and they embrace him, they show him love. There's a deep communion with nature. He talks about the trees almost singing, and they're really into nature, and they're one with nature. No jealousy, no quarreling, no competition. They had no temples, but they had a real, living, uninterrupted sense of oneness with the whole of the universe. So that's sort of if you want to do Lion King, a circle of life kind of thing. It was the earth untarnished by the fall. On it lived people who had not sinned. So it tells you right there, that's what he believes he saw. Did you guys have any thoughts or stuff on this part of the dream?
Sounds like a heaven or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that? I think that was. It's an interesting. That's an interesting comment.
Well, remember, he does in the second part of the dream even say, "Oh, you should crucify me." So an allusion to Jesus there. So it's not unrealistic to say, although he is talking about humanity, he's not saying it's angels or stuff like that, but still.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Okay.
I'll let you keep going.
Sure. So then the part two of the dream is where he realizes, almost sadly, he admits, like, I corrupted them. So, and the funny thing is this is not a short dream. He's like in this dream for like thousands of years, which is interesting in and of itself. But but it's an interesting. This is another really important part because what was the seed of corruption? What started it all? It almost sounds simplistic. Lying, being untruthful as the seed that corrupted this, the seed of evil. And he calls it there, the germ of falsity made its way into their hearts and pleased them. Then sensuality was begotten. Sensuality begot jealousy, jealousy, cruelty, on and on and on. But it started with not honoring truth. And it's interesting because lying is so easy, so commonplace. But, and I'm not perfect. I certainly have told lies. I always try not to, and try to be. I can't even remember specific ones, but I know I'm not going to pretend I've never lied. But I do very much see. I do believe this. I do believe that lying is insidious. That you need to, if you see it in yourself, you got to be wary of it in yourself. If you see it in yourself, you got to stamp it out. Whatever's causing it. Or if you start it, you got to come clean. Which in the old, well, we're all Catholic here. We were raised Catholic. That was what confession was about, right? In essence, to kind of stamp out that seed of sin by going to confession, confessing your sins, and then the priest would forgive your sins. I think another important part of that, and I actually think lying sets this up, but I think lying is so fundamental to evil. But I think there's one other piece to it that's really important, and it's the second one, this separation. Once you separate yourself, in fact, have you ever noticed that if you get in an argument or a quarrel, even with your spouse or a friend or a family member, your instant reaction is to kind of like pull back. It's like, get the fuck away from me. It's like your instant reaction is to separate yourself. Maybe it's like a protection instinct or something like that. But it's the total opposite of connection. Separation versus connection. And separation, and then of course they've proven it so many times psychologically, sets up that ability to do us versus them. You separate groups when you want to punish or perpetrate evil on them. They're different from you. And of course, he says they began to struggle for separation, for isolation, for individuality, for mine and thine. Classic us versus them. I find this last part very interesting. They sought science to save them, but science did not save them. Science, he says, basically made it worse because it made people prideful. Like, oh, we got this. We could do this through science, and he's basically saying this is below science, or this is beyond science. I want to briefly do a corollary here because when I was in the military and I was in Korea, I stumbled across a Buddhist Bible, and I read it, and I always thought it was excellent, but I do see this even kind of a little bit of corollary here between what this short story is talking about and Buddha's Four Noble Truths. These are the Four Noble Truths of Buddha. The first being life is suffering. Remember, we talked about the fall. Life is difficult. The second, though, is that suffering has a cause. And it's basically greed and attachment, craving, desire, and attachment. And I like to sum it up as greed. That's the one that I had read used the word greed. So suffering is caused by people's overly being attached to stuff, wanting too much. It is impossible to end suffering if you eliminate greed or this craving, this desire. And then the path to end suffering is the Eightfold Path. And most of the Buddhist religion is about how do you get the right view, the right intention, the right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. So um, basically, though, again, that there is a path to end suffering. So if you think about that in terms of what we're talking about here, I would say in some ways it's a corollary of there is a path to end nihilism too. So if nihilism is something that is easy to stumble into, then there is a path out of it also. And that's kind of what this short story is talking about. Somebody stumbled into this thought process, this destructive thought process. They had an incident that changed their viewpoint. They had a dream which showed them some truths, and then that was able to get them to ascend out of nihilism.
Some people translate that as a disappointment or dissatisfaction instead
You're
of
talking about
suffering.
the previous one?
But life is like unsatisfying or
Mm.
dissatisfaction, and that the mind is never really satisfied. Like it always finds something to complain about.
You're talking about in terms of which one of these? Number
Life
two?
is suffering. Life is suffering has been also translated as its life is disappointing or
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I guess so. I mean, that's kind of be a
dissatisfaction.
mild form of suffering, right? I mean, you could talk about real suffering like hunger and disease and aging. Hell, aging is suffering, right? Um, but yes, I could see sort of being
That we
disappointed,
all grow old, get sick, and die is the things that really started his whole journey on that.
right?
And that dissatisfaction is how the mind deals with everything. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. So, so he learned these truths, and then from that, and then he learned how 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 they were corrupted. And then the question is, okay, then what do you do? What's the steps out of nihilism? So now that he knows the truth, he saw purity, he saw understood the corruption, and now what do you do? So this is some of the things from the story that I think kind of shows these steps to redemption. First one is he accepted it, accepted that he's part of the problem. I told him that this was my doing, mine alone. Of course, he saw it in his dream anyway, that he corrupted him. But I think it's a little, I'm going to say it's a little broader than that, right? Accepting, even when we talked about in terms of weakness, you accept imperfections. I love that Japanese art where that'll take a cracked vase and then put gold and put pieces together and put gold in the seams. And it's a celebration of imperfections. The idea that, yes, you're not perfect. Life's not perfect, but that's okay. And if you change your perspective, you can see imperfections as improvements or imperfections are the natural state, and that's what makes you unique. So you don't necessarily see them as disappointments, you see them as positives. Yes, part of my imperfections is part of why I'm different, and that's something to be celebrated, not shamed. um, but the second one is important, is purpose. And I actually read an article too. There is another Japanese word like ikigai, something like that. I read an article talking about it today, but it was talking about sort of purpose in the small. That purpose doesn't have to be this burning bush moment. That purpose can be, much smaller and it's supposed to evolve. It's supposed to evolve through daily living. But in terms of the short story, he said, yes, I realized that life was good and that I had to spread the good tidings. In other words, he had to spread the message that he learned in terms of both purity and the corruption. Uh, last third part, striving. Again, just because it's hard doesn't mean you're not going to continue to stumble. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And he says here, who does not make mistakes? All are striving in the same direction anyway, from the sage to the lowest robber, only by different roads. So that not only are you striving, but you should, and I think this is an important distinction, um, especially when, everybody loves it when they see somebody who is at least trying to help themselves. If you see somebody who's just blowing off the world and and or just escaping into drugs or whatever, not that you won't not that you won't treat them as a human, you should, but you're not going to feel for them as strongly or try to help them as much as somebody who's really trying to better themselves, trying to get out of their situation. That striving is worth a lot. And the last part, of course, is love, and this is his ultimate realization and probably the ultimate way out of it. That idea of connection. Obviously, he says the chief thing is to love others like yourself, and he says, "And I track down that little girl, and I shall go on and on."
Nice.
So that is part 2 of nihilism: lessons learned from the dream of a ridiculous man.
Very interesting. How many pages was it?
I don't know. I read it on the site. It wasn't that long.
Wasn't that long?
Like
No.
40 minutes listening to it.
Yeah.
Very short.
Yeah. Wasn't that long at all.
Very good.
No, I liked the book. It was a good book. I like the way that it looked at that perspective of that, humanity's flawed with respect to our human nature. But that doesn't mean that your perspective should lead you into that state of isolation. You have a choice.
Right.
And he chose, the choice of connection and love and purpose. And it's like, so yeah, it was good.
I do think you need, there's so many, we've all done it. How many times we've been, naive or foolish, and Joe's mentioned it lots of times. If I would have sought some wise counsel, I would have made a better decision. You guys know, obviously we're getting together every week to kind of try to share and help each other out, but pretty confident you guys know if you had any, and I know Joe's done it and Christian's done it. I'm happy. I'm always here to talk to or try to noodle through things. But I think the simplest idea being that we need to help each other, right?
No, Christian says now go to ChatGPT. Just don't ask me. He says, you can always just put that same thing right into ChatGPT. You don't need to bother me. But anyway, here. No, but it's so funny now that
My God.
you do have somebody now that you can turn to. That is amazing.
Don't get me wrong. I actually agree with you that, ChatGPT is great. I actually read an article a couple of days ago saying it's a little too sycophantish in that it's too much agreeing with people seeking it for personal advice, which can lead down ugly paths. Because in other words, sometimes it should tell you, no, that's a bad idea. No, don't do that. But the problem is it's not geared to answer saying no, because it doesn't really know anything about it. It's just, so.
I went to the movie, the AI. It was a documentary. It was okay. I went to, because when I'm fasting, I like to go to the movies. So they have a documentary that just came out called The AI Doc, something.
Oh, I've heard about that. I think
It
I
was all
heard.
right. It was okay. Nothing that I didn't really know already, but it was okay. He just talks about some people have fears and some people are optimistic, and
Right.
really we need to sort of be more diligent in making it steer toward the direction that we want it to go. It can't just be a fucking loose cannon, because that's only going to lead, it's just going to have, it's too unpredictable.
No, I agree with you. But unfortunately, if you look at the history of computing, the regulation has never been there. They've never regulated it. Not really.
Right.
So, You
Yeah.
know, that's my biggest concern is if you look at the past in terms of have we regulated it, the answer would be no. They got full liability protection.
They showed one interesting thing. I think it was called Slavica, some country where just recently they had somebody during the election put out a fake audio of the person who was trying to be elected, and I think it was Russia that did it because the guy, his opponent was Russia, whatever. I guess he was more leaning toward them in his political thought, and it was a total fake like voice thing of him saying like blah blah blah, and they said it had an effect on the election. So that's what's gonna. I mean, that's next. That's coming. They're gonna have some fake video or fake something. I mean, they didn't even need AI to do it. It's already been out there, but now it's just gonna get better.
Yeah, it's definitely a brave new world. We'll see how it kind of shakes out. You know, I think it's gonna, as we know, it'll have pros and cons. We'll see which one is more.
Arrivederci.